Welcome to the Vital Strategies Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and today I'm excited to welcome fellow entrepreneur and business scaling expert, Eric Cruz. Have you ever considered what it actually takes to scale your business? Our conversation with Eric is sure to give you the tools to do just that. With a rich background in founding and mentoring companies, Eric brings invaluable insights to the table. As a lifelong entrepreneur dedicated to empowering others to grow their business, Eric shares potent strategies to create clarity, paving the way to business success. In this episode, we explore Eric's growth method, focusing on 4 key areas: people, operations, finance, and strategy. We discuss the importance of responsibility, sacrifice, and caring for clients, along with practical tips for setting and achieving goals. Be sure to stay to the end to hear Eric share his secrets to scaling businesses responsibly and effectively. Let's dive in and learn how to take your business to the next level. Eric, I'm excited for this conversation today. We've had the pleasure of interacting with your organization with some of the clients, and even personally, you guys are helping my wife out with some of her CFO function that they're needed to get some help with. They've grown to the point where they need some of that. So I appreciate you very much joining me here today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure. And thank you for being a client. We appreciate that as well, for certain.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'd really like to dig in and just discuss a little bit about your background, what Cruz & Co. does, and then we can really get into how you help business owners and entrepreneurs sort of grow and scale their business.
Okay, so first of all, I'm basically a lifelong entrepreneur. Both sides of my family were entrepreneurs, and that's pretty much all I know. So, interestingly, I went to college for entrepreneurship and business, and ultimately ended up founding through kind of a long journey a company called Collegiate Entrepreneurs Painting Services that taught college kids how to run painting businesses for the summer. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, a lot of people that are in the college painting space also go into coaching, and there's a reason for that. So our whole goal in that company was to teach entrepreneurship to really exceptional college students. So we would go in and we'd hire. I used to get this question about how do you take these average college students and make them so successful? And the answer was we didn't. We would hire team captains, club presidents, Eagle Scouts, and all these top women and men, female leaders that were just already good. And we give them a place to learn about entrepreneurship. So we would set them up in this business. We teach them how to run about a $70,000 business for the summer on average. And then they graduate and they'd go, and some of them would stay around and run larger businesses. Mm-hmm. They'd go into finance or whatever else they wanted to do in life. And they have a tremendous resume boost. So to do that, we would have 600-700 employees at a time in the summertime. And over the time that I owned that company, we had about 12,000 employees. So I learned a lot about scale. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about reverse engineering, a tremendous amount of reverse engineering. So in fact, if I talk to you for an hour about just your business, mm-hmm. it always goes in the same way, which is ultimately where are you trying to go? Big picture, like are you trying to blow the cover off the ball? Are you trying to grow to a certain size? Are you trying to change the world? What does it look like in a couple of years? What does it look like in a year? What does it look like in 90 days? And then what's going to stop that from happening? Mm-hmm. And what can we do to accelerate that? But I got all that from teaching college kids how to run $70,000, which when you have 130 of them across on 2 different coasts of the country, there's a lot of required process and management and accountability and systems and scorecards. And you're sprinting in a business that has to do with 100 and some job sites at once, mm-hmm. And no one's trained. So you have to do everything at once. And that's how I learned about scale. And that was I didn't know it at the time, but that was a great way to learn those lessons. So eventually I sold it. I sold that business. I also, along the way, we started a commercial painting company, which I still own. It's a very fast growing commercial. We do large commercial buildings. It's up and down the East Coast. And I have a great leadership team in that company that I'm very proud of. And I'm a member of a couple entrepreneur organizations, and I got into volunteer mentoring. And then that eventually got me into, I started doing a bunch of EOS work, a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial
Yep.
Operating System. I did that. I was one of the first people in Boston to do that. And I did that for about 8 years. And then eventually I started my own consulting firm. And I did that because I had a lot of success in business. I had a lot of success helping companies scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, in the process of doing that, I accumulated a lot of resources. And I was constantly being asked to help other entrepreneurs how to scale large quantities of people.
Yeah.
And I just have started my own firm really for the purpose of making sure that small and medium-sized businesses in particular, really we're usually sub 1,000 employees, and that's what we're working with, sub 1,000. Yep. We want to make sure that small businesses and medium-sized companies have access to the same premium resources, systems, thinking as a large company would. So probably because my whole life has been based on entrepreneurship, I feel very strangely accountable to the people, to our clients' success, and very almost protective of them because they're basically an offshoot of me. So that's why I built the company. So our company is here to be a resource as a way to help companies grow what we call RPV, which is revenue, profit, and valuation. We're very focused on that. And we just focus on small and medium. Like I said, about 1,000 employees is our cap. We'll work with companies that are as small as 2 or 3 million, as long as they have some kind of scaling proposition that they have. Yep. And that's our we work with about 130 companies across the US and Canada. And that's really, that's kind of my story. That's how I got here.
I love that. And I don't want to discount how hard it is to start a business and then scale it up to this coast to coast. I can't imagine the challenges you faced thinking about, like, I've got all these college kids, they're untrained. We have a very compressed window to get all this work done. They got a few months. I don't even have a few months to train them. I got a few months to like get them productive and profitable. And then, they go back to school and hopefully I get some of them back next year and we don't have to repeat the process. So
So Patrick, you have nailed it, by the way. You've nailed it. I can tell you how hard it is, actually, if that's your actual question. It's freaking hard. That's the answer to your question.
Well, and I think there's something too, like being a business owner in general, that is freaking hard. Like it's statistically speaking, you shouldn't do it. You should just go like get a job because the failure rate's really high. And then we look at the number of businesses that never break into that mid-sized business. They're solely dependent on the business owner to hustle and make it all go and work. And they really have no ability to scale because they sort of like capped out at what the owner can sort of handle and manage. And so I think the fact that you've done that and been able to take all of that learning that you've done over all these years, running that business, the commercial painting business, the coaching business, and the cool thing I see, working with a number of entrepreneurs, we start to see patterns of success, right? And you're like, okay, cool. We've been able to give some insight to people, but then we start to see these patterns and we're like, all right, let's take and build some systems and processes around this so we can make it repeatable for our clients day in and day out. Because there's some almost fundamental truths on how to manage finance well, how to scale a business. And so can we talk a little bit about the framework that you've developed to help businesses scale? You've touched on the RPV, the revenue profit valuation piece. I'm sure that is going to help us. The framework's going to help us increase all of those things.
Yes. So great. So my background while I was an entrepreneur, I had a business coach, a guy named Mark Moses, great business coach, also from the student painting industry, interestingly. Hugely, very, very large firm he runs. He was my coach for many years. And he taught me a lot about making sure, really a lot about reverse engineering and a lot about how to scale and all that kind of thing. So that was a coaching methodology that I learned and I worked with him. I became an EOS person and I learned a lot about how to have a system of any kind. And in that particular case, one that's focused on operations. Mm-hmm. So when we started our consulting firm, One thing we knew with certainty was we had to pick an area to focus on. And we had a lot, we certainly want to make sure people have great lives. And in fact, that's our mission.
Yeah.
But we had to lean in on something. So we said, we're going to lean in on dollars. We're going to lean in on revenue, profit, and valuation. So to do that, we wanted to not just be a coaching or just a regular consulting firm, because I had a lot of experience with systems. So I had a lot of experience with EOS. I had my coach. I knew a lot about scaling up and some other systems that I'd been in. And my collegiate painting company was basically a systems-based company. So we're big believers in systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we built our own operating system called the growth method. And we combined 4 quadrants. And really our goal was to take the simplicity of some of the systems that are out there, but also not make it too simple that it wasn't going to be good enough to scale at a large size. So our system focuses on 4 areas. We focus on people, operations, finance, which you know well about, and strategy.
Yep.
And are generally, when we work with a company, the first year and a half, we're focusing all 4 of those to get the house cleaned up, depending on what level of disarray they have.
Yep.
But we get them all cleaned up. Everybody's lined up. Everybody's rowing the same direction. So the first couple of years, we tend to focus on, first year and a half, we focus on operations, people, finance, and then strategy really starts to kick in as being super valuable once you get those cleaned up. But we're pretty passionate that, all of our experience shows is that if you just do people and operations, you may have a really clean business, but it may not be making money. So you got to bring in finance, and you got to focus on all those big things. And then it may be making money, but maybe it can't scale. And that may be because you're not addressing what the market needs. Your value prop could be off. Your target market could be off. Your messaging could be off. So we try and pull all 4 of those together. And we found out that any one without the other 3, they don't really work for scale.
Yeah.
So that's why we built the growth method.
I love it. Okay. So there's a few things I want to sort of bring back together. And you brought up this really interesting comment. You said our mission is to help people live great lives. And if you look over my shoulder, it says make life great.
I saw that.
One of our things that we really dig into with our clients is sort of our tagline is we help you pay less tax, build more wealth so you can live a great life. At the end of the day, like building more wealth just to build more wealth, another zero doesn't do anything for our happiness, satisfaction, that type of thing. So I'm thinking of, I love that. And it really helps direct the strategy we help our clients develop. So can we talk a little bit about that? So earlier you said, I want to know where the entrepreneur is from a growth perspective. Do they want to knock the cover off the ball? Do they, just want to sort of maintain? Because I feel like those things start to, if you know where the client's wanting to go from a business perspective, what a great life definition looks like. It's easy to start developing some strategy around like, okay, here's the direction we're going to take for the business. Because I could see a scenario where it's like, we're going to exit this business or we're going to sell it as an ESOP. Those are 2 drastically different, they're both exits, right? But one, it's like, we're increasing enterprise value for these people that I care about, really enjoy working with. And I want them to sort of take and steward this thing into the future versus somebody else that's like, I'm just trying to get a big dollar figure because I want to go have a different impact in a different way. So can you talk a little bit about great life and strategy and how those pieces tie together? So
it's a great question. And when we built our firm and we worked on solidifying our own mission and North Star, we had to have a lot of discussion around that. Because if you came into the inner workings of our company, we are very focused on individuals and teams. But we have a core value of your business is our business. So when we say that we want you to hit your RPV targets, they could be small, they could be epic, they could be negative and trying just a big valuation. We just want you to hit them, whatever they are. But we chose that after a lot of conversation because ultimately we always start with the same question, which is where are you trying to go? And then what what problem is your business trying to solve in the world?
Yeah.
And the degree, and that goes into the strategy component. So we focus on RPV because honestly, we don't want to be lazy consultants who deliver a bunch of advice and have it not have ROI.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts. So we wanted to be able to say, if you're giving us dollars, you're going to get more dollars back.
Yeah.
So, but when we work with a client, to the degree that they want whatever success they have to have extreme clarity around why they're doing it, what's going to make them happy, the level of sacrifice that can be involved at those at certain sizes, and especially if they want to have an exit, which a lot of our clients do, not all, but some. I still tell them you can't build a company. You want to build to sell. I love it. Great concept. A great book. I like it. I'm not saying that's not good, but if you're looking at companies that really succeed, they might sell, but the exit actually becomes kind of a milestone amongst a much longer journey for that company. And we try and get companies to think about, okay, you might sell. We know you're definitely not around forever, so something's going to happen to your business unless you're going to live for it, right? You do. This is your whole life, right? This is your financial, right? Everybody's like, well, when I get older, and I'm like, well, you're already older, and you're already in the back nine, so that's what we tell people. We say, well, you're going to sell or something in the next 20 years, right? So we try to get them to think in terms of what's going to make you happy, truly happy. Why is it going to make you happy? And then often we ground them and they say, well, we want to exit for X amount of dollars, $20 million or wherever the number. And then usually it comes down to, then we need the business then to be growing and scaling to more like a $50 to $100 million business, because we're selling something that needs to be future value for the next owner. And is usually going to answer a bigger cause in life.
Sure.
So that's what we're focused on, but it starts with that owner. When a company comes to work here, we track all results, every single company on a chart. If we can't identify those actually what a person cares about, it makes the engagement very difficult. So that's what we say when we say we're focusing on people in their ideal lives. And then it's the whole team. Are you all living a job that's amazing to you? Are you in the right seat? And if you're not, how can we sensitively and with caring get you into another company or a different seat in this company so that the company can continue to accelerate?
Yeah, I love so much of this. So my first introduction to Cruise was actually through a mutual client. And I loved the way he was interested in his mission around his people. He cared so much about his people, and he figured out, like, if I love my people really well, take really good care of them, I start getting the outcomes that I need inside of my business, because they're, this thing is way beyond his ability to run it and manage it. And so I love that piece, because we've also talked about that internally. Like, my whole goal when I hire somebody during the interview process is I want to put you in a position to thrive. Okay. And there may be a point where we can no longer provide that for you. And that's okay. Like, you're obligated to go pursue the best thing for you, for yourself. And the thing that I find is neat about that is, like, when I care about the individual, the people on my team, you're seeing it in your team internally and your clients that you're working with, is when you care about your people, they tend to show up and, like, perform for you. They do a great job of putting in the work. And so I think that's fantastic. Another point I wanted to touch on is we love quantified value. Like, most of the clients that end up coming to us, we have 4 cornerstones of wealth building. It's cash flow, tax, investing, and protection. Okay. Like, they all sort of fit together. But most people come to us for the tax problem. They're like, hey, I either owe more money to the IRS than I have cash to pay for it, or I'm paying too much money. I don't like these 6-7 figure checks I'm writing. Help me figure this piece out. And then we started putting the other pieces together. But the thing I like about our business model is you pay us a fee and we save you a multiple of that in tax savings. Like, it's pretty easy, and we do all of these other things. So I love that you're so focused on the RPV. We've got revenue, profitability, and valuation of the company that you can point to. You can say, here's where you were when you started with us. Here's where we're at today. Like, I think that's a fantastic thing from a coaching perspective to be able to say, hey, we're going to be able to measure our success, and we're going to be able to look at this and really see quantifiable value change in your business. So one thing I've got a question about, like when we talked about the people, the operations, the finance, and then the strategy, I think my question goes to sometimes cleaning up the people, operations, and finance doesn't necessarily drive a lot of money to the bottom line because we're
Oh,
like fixing a mess,
you're now my favorite
Eventually it gets
podcast.
there.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So can we talk a little bit about like sort of the time frame it takes to, go from engagement to like, hey, this is when I'm starting to see these changes happen? Because I think societally, we like a drive-through breakthrough, right?
Right.
We like the 5-minute abs, the 10-minute, the makeover shows that happen in a day. It's like we all want that like instant
Oh, yeah.
gratification. So
So you're a genius. You got this down. One, I will give you a bit of a public service announcement because you have a great. I like your own your quadrants and your methodology. It's very specific. So if you listen to this podcast and you haven't looked at your methodology and how you have broken down the steps, I think it's very
yeah,
very well done. Now,
thank you.
so to your question, so first of all, clarify. We I love you said about the drive-through. So we are like the gym. We are
Hmm.
either like the gym or asparagus, whichever of those you like more. We are
Hmm.
vegetables. So we are the least sexy firm you could ever work with in terms of breakthroughs. Our clients grow directionally upwards almost continually. There are
Hmm.
obviously some exceptions, but almost continually, almost through any market. And they do get breakthroughs along the way up. And they
Hmm.
certainly have downtimes too. So I'm not trying to say they don't.
Yeah.
But our goal is constantly breaking them uphill. So
Hmm.
ideally, it's smooth and fluid, and we try and take as much pain out of it as possible. But the reality is that people always ask me, like, when does this ever get really easy? And my answer is, you keep growing to areas you've never been before. Easy is
Hmm.
really not something that's going to happen to you. You might hit scale points that launch you,
Yep.
but you've never grown a business as big as this one you have right now, ever.
Hmm.
So it's something that people got to understand. It's much like going to a gym, in my
Yep.
opinion. When you're scaling a company, you never had that kind of weight on you. So when you
Hmm.
lift it, it's going to be harder. And when you're running a
Yep.
scaling company, you're adding weights every week in some
Yep.
cases. So I'm going to go to the other question, which is a fantastic question about strategy and how that plays in.
Sure.
And so there are some exceptions to what I'm about to say, but not many. We work with hundreds of entrepreneurs. The,
Hmm.
the, the there is no breakthrough that is this magic bullet. As my coach tells me, he reminded me once when I was whining to him. He said, Eric, if it's easy to make $1 million a year, everybody would do it. So stop
Hmm.
whining. These are
Yep.
difficult things we need to figure out, and we're going to figure them out, and you need to own that and be excited about it.
Yep.
And I've never forgotten that statement. Your first question. I say this, and people always throw rocks at me when I say this. And then I say, well, challenge me on it then.
Hmm.
So, there are the companies that most people look up to and idolize that are super successful are generally super successful because they have built a better, smarter, faster, more innovative mousetrap of some kind.
Hmm.
And that's how they do it. So it's not that you can't run a well-run business and really scale and get really, but you you don't love the companies you love because they're well-run companies. Like in
Right.
fact, most of those companies are run pretty badly that a lot of
Hmm.
this is with. So in answer to your question, we're very cautious. We tend to go in first and clean things up. We clean the operations, or not even, they're not always messy. We just get them aligned. We get
Yep.
everybody aligned. We get everybody talking in a language that's consistent. We get everybody focused on setting 90-day targets, annual targets,
Yeah.
because that gets them into a methodology of going to the gym and having a way to frame things. We get them on scorecards and processes. We use OKRs, objectives and key results, which are phenomenal
Hmm.
for aligning big organizations. However, once we get everything, we make sure right people are in the right seats, and we have a plan for evolution of those people as well, and training, and But I always tell people, I say once in about a year and a half, year and a half, you're going to get everything lined up, and you're going to say, "Wow, we are running like a champ." But that's not usually what catapults you into being successful. It can certainly help with organic, okay? And I'm not dissing it by any stretch because it's what we do for a living. So
Yep.
there is I'm not trying to say to anybody, don't run a great business, don't operate a great business. But you've got to really ask yourself, what problem am I trying to solve in the world? And how am I going to take away market share from somebody else who's already got their version of trying to solve that?
Yep.
So you got to go out and do some competitive analysis. You got to think. If you're anything over 6-8, I mean, depending on the size of your space, if you're anything over $6-8-10 million in gross revenue and revenue, you're going to have different questions to ask yourself. And if you start getting 20, 30, 50 million in revenue, you're taking revenue from somebody else.
Yep.
And you got to ask yourself, why is that? And then you got to figure out. So we're going to focus a lot on value prop strategy. Why are people buying from us? Yep. What are we solving? And then lining the entire company up internally to make sure that all the team members know this is what the problem we're trying to solve in the market. This is how you need to behave internally. And the customers need to see externally, I want that, because that is what is going to satisfy whatever I might need, my either pleasure or my pain or whatever. And answering that question once you're operationally strong, that's when a company goes like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And so there's a couple things that come to mind. Seth Godin, he's a marketer. He was writing a blog before, and I was reading it before I knew what blogs were. And he showed up and he wrote every day. But one of the concepts he talked about was the purple cow. He's like, I live in Iowa. We have lots of cows, right? So driving through the countryside, you see your first Holstein cow. You're like, oh, cool. It's white with black spots. That's kind of neat. And then after a while, all the cows look the same. But if you run across the purple cow, you're like, that's different, And I think what you're talking about here is like, be a purple cow, stand out, have a unique offering. And then I think there's also something that I think you're saying, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like focus matters, right? Like having a niche, and if I'm Toyota's done a great job, but if I'm selling beige Camrys, right, and I'm trying to compete in the beige Camry market, that's hard because there's a million of them out there. Versus like just to pick, a Lamborghini, for example, there's only a select few number of people that want it, and you sort of love it or you hate it, and that's okay, And so I think there's a level of focus, like let's know exactly who we are. I think you were saying this, like align all of the people up in the organization to know exactly who we are, know what kind of client we serve or customer we serve, and what our value is we deliver, versus, hey, let's have all of these different products, sort of diluting our, not that you can't have a lot of products, but it should be serving that one sort of avatar that is out there. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So one, that's absolutely the case in our opinion. And it's a tough. So small and medium sized businesses don't often talk about strategy, and one of the biggest reasons they don't talk about strategy is that they often are very focused on running a clean business, and they're operators and they're good at it, and they can get to 5, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, and they can do well financially. But the big businesses only talk about strategy because they are gobbling stuff up. Like they don't have the luxury of running a great business and being able to do that. So what I'm saying is you got to pick. Your Camry example is perfect. So I meet so many companies and they say, well, I'm amazing. Well, why are you amazing? Because I'm the best at X, Y, and Z. Yeah, okay. That company over there says that too. And well, yeah, but we really are. Okay. Well, if that's the case, I need to see numeric proof of that. And I need to see your competitors' numbers also. And I need you to tell me the delta between you and the competitors. Because what you're telling me is basically that you're bigger, faster, or stronger.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you got to prove it. And then your whole company needs to work on becoming bigger, faster, and stronger. If you have a product or an innovation that's a little different because then you say, well, I'm not bigger, faster, and stronger. I have a Tesla. Oh, yeah. Well, so if you invented the Tesla, you're going to win this game, right? Because you have a Tesla. Or I invented the iPhone. Everybody says Steve Jobs is an incredible businessman. Maybe, maybe not. He's definitely a great innovator. He definitely built a great product. That's for certain. Bill Gates certainly built a great product. Howard Schultz, under a little bit of fire right now, but he certainly built a great place for us to go hang out. So these people have chosen a strategy, and it is very clear on what they're trying to do. And in most cases, it's very simple. And they said the market has a hole, and anybody can do it. Doesn't matter what size your business is. And you find that hole and you say, that's the hole I'm going to satisfy. And that's what the market needs. And then get everybody lined up behind that operational. Another reason small, medium-sized businesses struggle with this one strategy so much is because honestly, they don't always need it. So people are like, work at companies and they'll say, well, I want to figure out my niche. And I say, what's your target? 15 million. What's your space? This. You're good to go. Just run a really good business. You'll suck up 15 million just because the owner is charming, right? Or because you're great at marketing. Like there's enough business for you to do 15, 20 million. But if they say they want to be $100 million company, I say we're taking revenue from somebody else to do that. I need to know how we're doing that. So we use for our strategy section of our system, we use our source material is 2 books. Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and Playing to Win. Playing to Win is the source book for Deloitte also and McKinsey and all. If you can Google Playing to Win and the diagram, and that's what these companies use. And in those companies, they ask you, they say you got to answer 5 questions, and you got to answer, what is my winning aspiration? What is the big thing I'm trying to accomplish? Who am I going to sell to? Basically, who's my market? How am I going to win in the market that I've chosen? Like, what is my strategy to actually win? And it's funny, if you read the book, there's nothing in there around, I'm going to run a great company. It's just like, they kind of assume that. So what are you going to do to win? Like actually win? What capabilities do you need in order to win? And then lastly, what business systems do you need in order to win? And we try and provide a part of that business system answer. But what's interesting about Playing to Win is they say there's only 2 ways you can win in a market as a company. They say there's only 2 ways you can ever win. And that is you can either find a cheaper way to do something. So you can then lay off that cost to your clients and you can do a cheaper product, or you can just have a cheaper cost and then have better customer service or whatever you want to do and still be a premium product. So one is you can deliver something less expensive. You find a less expensive way to do it. And the second is you need to have a better product or service. It's the only 2 ways you can win in the market. And the degree that you can answer those questions becomes the degree, in my observations, to the degree you get those questions right, assuming you run an operationally strong company, is the degree to which you will grow quickly.
I'm going to share some of my bias. Like, I sort of hate the idea of finding a cheaper way. Like, that sounds like a terrible way to be in business. Just because
that's commodity space at that point.
You're moving into commodity. Like how and the efficiencies I have to create, and if anybody comes along and figures out how to do it cheaper, I am screwed. Like, our goal is to be the most expensive product in the market, to deliver so much freaking value that people can't help but write us checks to help deliver that value. And so we're constantly trying to deliver a better product or service. And the interesting thing about doing that is we start off and we're like, oh, we are like light years ahead of our category in how we do things. But then we start looking around and we're like, there are a few peers out here that do this. How do we get better than those people? And we're just constantly trying to level up in how we deliver the value. Do you have comments on, which of those 2 strategies you like better?
It's interesting. We have a lot of companies, so I try and stay pretty agnostic on my answers, believe it or not. I always start with the philosophy that the business owner knows way more about their business than I do. And also it's their business, not mine. However, what I do care about is that whatever their choice is, whether they're going to try and run a less expensive way to deliver their product, or whether they're going to
Mm-hmm.
have a better mousetrap or a
Yep.
better service, I care that it matches up against their vision and what they're trying to accomplish in the marketplace. And I care that I can visualize that it will actually beat their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
there are companies that lean into commodities thinking that do really well.
Mm-hmm.
For example, here's one that people is interesting that people don't think about is at least I didn't think about it until I did more research. Amazon. So
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is not a is in no way a other than their cloud stuff and everything else they have going on. They're in no way that interesting of a company. All they
Mm-hmm.
really do is sell you a wide variety of now commoditized, weird, off-brand stuff. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
so tremendous
Yep.
variety. So that's their first value prop. The second value prop is that it's so simple to buy. I think the thing knows when you get a new credit card without even entering it at this point. Like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
simple. And they got drones flying over us, dropping boxes on us like 5 minutes after you buy stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's an example of a company that um, leaned into commodity metrics and
Mm-hmm.
said, what if we'd made it as fast as humanly possible for the delivery? What if we
Yeah.
made the sale so fast it was literally buttons? And then what
Mm-hmm.
if we expanded variety? And then they had to build a distribution channel and all this other kind of stuff. But that's a commodity way of doing it. But
Yep.
that is also, you got to be an extremely good operator to have that kind of leverage. So
Yep.
I do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to lean in on my competitors are offering this. I think the market needs this. And here's why I think the market needs this.
Yep.
And then we test it. We test those theories. So I tend
Mm-hmm.
to agree with you.
Yeah. Great. So the table stakes for the two books you mentioned, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and Playing to Win, are running a good business. Like, you got to be running a good business. And would you
Yeah.
say that when we look at the four foundational pieces that you have, the four quadrants, we've got the people, the operations, the finance. Are those pieces sort of the critical components to running a good business?
Uh,
Is that where we have to start?
so I don't like to say many things definitively.
Hmm.
That one I'll say yes to.
Yeah.
So when we work with a company, if you get right people in right seats,
Hmm.
and you have and beyond that, you need to have a way of thinking about what right people, right seats looks like
Yeah.
as the organization evolves. Also, because most people get right people, right seats right if they do it, and then they
Hmm.
say, "Okay, great, now I'm good," and I say, "Yeah, you're good for about 2, 3 more million, maybe."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you're going to have to change it. So we actually document all that path out
Yeah.
to give people a little more confidence.
Hmm.
So you got to nail right people, right seats. You got to have some kind of managerial rhythm at some point. You got to
Yeah.
have some kind of goal setting system, whether it's annual
Yeah.
meetings or quarterly meetings, because otherwise it's too slippery. So you got to have
Hmm.
that. You got to have a scorecard of some kind. You got to have processes that are
Yeah.
documented.
Sure.
Um, and there's a whole bunch of other things you need as well. And you got to have
Yeah.
a vision that's all mapped out
Hmm.
and a roadmap, and you got to have a clear North Star. And then we think the whole company has to be aligned on those things, top to bottom.
Yeah.
You check all those boxes. Our issue with our clients, believe it or not, even if they're quote unquote badly behaved or difficult,
Yeah.
okay. If I was a client of us, I'm not sure I wouldn't fit into that box, actually.
Hmm.
Even for the badly behaved, difficult clients,
Hmm.
we can get them to be operationally strong. And I mean like strong beyond their even what they thought.
Yeah.
In a very long cycle, 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
very long. That's
Sure.
cleaned up the whole business.
Yeah.
The biggest issue becomes I try and tell them this early on. I say, look, you're going to get to a point where you're running like an operational machine. And
Hmm.
then you're going to realize that really wasn't your problem. Your problem is what's the delta between 30 million and 100 million?
Yeah.
That's going to be the problem you're going to have to answer.
Yep.
And that's when we start really, and we try and get them to start working on that early.
Hmm.
But that's ultimately where they end up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I also, I'm tying back to some things you said earlier. I love the quarterly time frame. The 13 weeks that encompass a quarter, I think, are a perfect amount of time to create some sprints for us to really go, all right, here's our 13-week target. Let's hustle to get there. Let's see how we did, stop, recalibrate, figure out where we go, onto the next thing. Because I think there's sometimes as business owners, we can step back and we can go, I'm standing at the foot of the mountain. This looks impossible, right? Versus if I go, hey, if I just walk up to that tree and then we make it to that stream, like if I break it into these small little chunks, it makes the process a little more manageable. It can be exciting to everybody to really have some focus for those next 13 weeks. I sort of like 12 weeks. The 13th week we can use to like recalibrate, and then we're off on the next
Right.
next one. So I wanted to just bring that quarterly piece into figuring out all of the operational stuff, because I think it's important. And then once you, I think you said this, once you get there, like, okay, cool, like we're operationally okay, but now we've got some bigger targets. We're going to just continue to have to work on some of these things to continue with our strategy. I might have a controller, but I'm going to have to hire a CFO, or
Correct. Yes.
some of these other pieces. So
it's interesting because I have three companies. We have the finance company, we have the consulting company, and then we have the commercial painting business. I don't know any other world where we're not meeting every 90 days. It's almost become a weird thing for me to talk about it, because people say, well, should I do X, Y, and Z? And all I think is, I don't know how else you do it. Like, what do you write down? Like, where do you put stuff? When do you follow up? Are you just trying your best? And which I don't discount. I'm not trying to be flip about that. Like, I actually do wonder it. So I have an interesting experience, because my partner in the commercial painting business, who I've been with for 20 years, and it's a relatively sizable business, we do all of our management consulting stuff inside that company. And he's like the cynic of all cynics. And he's like, so even him, we started doing this years and years ago. And he says, okay, Eric, we're going to do these stupid quarterly meetings, and we're going to use OKRs to set targets. And then even him, in the past year, he said, all right, let's do a state of the company address every quarter. And this is a commercial painting company with a bunch of project managers and site guys in it.
Yeah.
He's like, let's do it. And then he said, all right, you're right. Let's start doing the quarterly meetings with the project managers too. And when you start getting in alignment and we start saying objectives, so our objectives can be broad. So the reason I love OKRs so much, and I used to use rocks because I was in my past life. We use OKRs because objectives allow us to set broader statements, which we can then carry quarter to quarter, or years if we want to. So in our company, like right now for the commercial business, we have a big education initiative. So in education we're trying to become the number one go-to firm for painting schools in the country. So that's an objective. There's a lot of other objectives that are underneath of that, but that's an objective that is broad. It's an important part of our business. It doesn't really have a timeline, but then we set a bunch of key results against it. And those key results are due very specifically every 90 days. So I can take that objective, go to my project management team, my site supervisor team, and say, we're trying to build this education thing. And this quarter, you got to focus on the following to do that. But what do you think you need to do this quarter to help us out with that? Because I have this broad objective, they will give me ideas. They'll say something like, okay, well, why don't I do a mailer for schools in my area? Or why don't I stop by these 5 colleges? So we take these broad objectives, operationalize them with very specific things over 90-day periods of time. And those 90 days times become our sprints. And we'll keep objectives alive until they become the DNA of our company. And it's very, very valuable. So it keeps us strategic, yet also operationally strong. And in regards to the 90 days, we just wrote an article about this, actually. I've had so many different experiences where what happens is if you start to follow up on stuff at like 6 months, at 10 weeks or 11 weeks, it's too soon. It's not enough time to get anything done. Yet at the same time, when you start following up at 110 to 120 days, people start to lose connection around themselves, to each other, and around what they're doing. So What's interesting is the standard planning cycle for private equity and other companies at this point is somewhat starting to become every 90 days, but instead of just doing annual planning now, they're doing planning every 6 months.
Yep.
Because the world's work is running fast.
Yep.
So when I work with a private equity company firm, we're still doing 90-day meetings, but they're replanning their business every 6 months because that's how fast they're moving.
Yep. Sure. I love it. So there's a few things here that I think are great. So one thing I want to highlight, you talked about in your painting company how this started off as a top down initiative. We started looking at this quarterly, and we just kept bringing these quarterly sprints, down to the different levels, and it really created results. I think that's cool because you're finding people on the front lines that are able to solve problems. They're seeing things that you're not seeing and being able to handle those in a way that are really good. One thing I have, a question I have, we see it with our clients. We also see it internally is, I think as entrepreneurs, we're overly optimistic on how much we can get done. And so we set some of these targets on a quarterly or annual basis. And then we can see that halfway through, we're not going to get there. Do you have, and that can be demotivating, I think, to the team, go, geez, we didn't make it again. And we also see clients that project their annual revenues and we're like, okay, 35% growth. That's really impressive. And then we're on our way and we're not getting there. And I'm going to tie this to a book I just read from John Acuff called Finish. And he had an interesting perspective. He was like, take your goals and cut them in half. And I'm like, John, this sounds crazy to me. It sounds like we're pouring water on, my dreams and excitement as an entrepreneur. And he goes, the interesting thing that happens is when you hit your target, you'll keep going, right? When you cut it in half, you'll keep going. But if you see this goal and you're not going to make it, oftentimes, our human nature is to quit and sort of stop trying to get there. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how entrepreneurs should go about setting some of these quarterly sprints? Because I think we get a little excited and then
sure. Yeah. So one, so do I. So I'll start with that.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. And I'll also say I have no patience. So, which I think is a strength. And then it's not, right? Yep. So I have an answer to this one, but I didn't for 20 years plus. And I languished in this answer. And I finally found the answer that works best for us anyway. So in our company, we are continuously going for it. Okay. That's our culture, to be clear. So not everybody's culture has to be that. And we encourage it. So we encourage going for it. We encourage going for it over perfection for the most part.
Yeah.
And our standard is about 80%. Now, I'm going to be very clear on this. We set committed targets and we set aspirational targets where it's appropriate, especially around revenue, profitability, margin, sometimes new logo counts. We'll say committed is this. We call it the bank. That's your bank number. You miss that, you got problems that are different. We got different issues. And it's important to set that number because you got to know this is the bottom it can be. So the team knows that. But then we kind of put that in a little box and we say, there's the bottom. It's written on the screen. We know what the bottom is. And then we're really going for this number or getting this project done. Generally speaking, we get a lot more leverage out of our business by going for it. And if we fall to 80, 85%, the stretching creates innovation and new ways of thinking. And we're just falling uphill. And over time, we've been setting goals from a quarterly basis for many, many years now. You get better at it. So the swings aren't as bad. We'll now miss by 15% and it'll feel like it's 50 at this point.
Sure.
But we don't usually miss by more than 15% or 20% on an absolute really bad quarter. So you got to have some limits. But our clients are going for it responsibly. And I appreciate what you say you're going to do. I appreciate accountability. In fact, we try and create that accountability. But we get paid for growth. So growth is appropriate discomfort and innovation. And so our governors, though, are what is the committed number?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is the aspiration?
Yeah.
And we manage towards the aspiration and call BS at the committed number.
I love it. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. And there are a couple points that we see consistently with our entrepreneurs is the two things you mentioned there. They're not patient, which I think is really good. I think that's a fantastic thing. Like let's strive for more, and that's where the aspirational number comes in. Like we're going to set this target, and we're going to hustle to get there. And if we fall a little short, like we'll just keep making that progress in that direction, and it's great.
What's interesting, Patrick, is so it comes down to I get asked in these podcasts a lot about my regrets, which I don't have many of, honestly. And I've had some big dinger failures too. Like you could entertain your audience for an hour on. They'd feel real good about themselves after I talk for an hour about some of my mistakes. But the only regret I have in business is I think I spent too much of my time flogging myself against a wall to be successful without enough strategic thinking and intentionality behind what I was doing.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, a switch went off in my head. And I said, just because I can get something done, I'm not sure it's always smart to get something done.
Yeah.
And the question I now look at is, I don't just set numbers anymore. Like we'll say we're going to double the company in the next year or two, whatever their number is. And that's a good place to start. So don't get me wrong. That's a good place to start. But you then have to say, well, how are we going to do that? We're not going to like put on a cape for the first time ever. We're not going to like become Einstein when this meeting's over. And I don't think we're going to add more hours in our day. So we now no longer set a plan for numbers unless we feel like the activity and the changes and the strategy exist to almost guarantee that plan's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things I end up doing with companies. They send me this plan and I say, that looks like hope. Like I don't buy it. I need to see the difference between here and here. And some years, actually, some quarters, I'll work with companies and I'll say, I'd hold the number this quarter if we can. Let's hold the number. Let's focus on building these things because right now you're trying to run when you should be trying to build. And you got to know when you're building, because when you're building, you want to be building well and still running a great business. But if you're trying to push while you build foundation, that can often be, that impatience can end up taking your time frame, which would have been 1 year for something, and make it 5 years for something.
Right. And to take it a step further, we've seen businesses go out of business because what got them to this point, they don't change any of the foundational pieces. And they keep trying to build the business bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the whole thing just falls down. It just is, it's a disaster because it's okay. We think of a flywheel. Like it's okay when it's spinning slow, if it's a little out of balance, but you spin it up really fast and soon it just wrecks itself. It falls apart. And
that's exactly right. So we call those levers. So we say, I'll look at a plan and they'll say, well, I'm going to go from 18 million to 30 million in the next 2 years. And I'll say, okay, I can buy about 5 million of that from operational efficiency, which we can pull out of the business. I think we can increase sales success rates. I think we can increase average job size, blah, blah, blah. I say, I don't buy the 7 million though. I don't see the levers because I know I can see the 5, but what are you pulling to get the other 7? And they'll say, well, it's going to sell more. Through what mechanism? Are we spending more on marketing? Are we hiring sales reps? What is the average rep going to give us? What is our cost of acquisition? Do we have the cash to scale? Do we have the proof that that's going to be good ROI? But it's those levers that companies often miss. They just say, well, I'm just going to grow. And I say, it's not going to work. We have to figure out what's the scalable model? What are the inputs that we need to make sure we're doing? If the inputs are known, like that's good. If it's just a matter of I'm creating 50 widgets and the market's strong and I need to be able to create 100 widgets, well, we can do that. But if it's I'm creating 50 widgets and I don't know how to get to 100 widgets in terms of sales, then we got to focus on that. And so our number setting is rooted in what is the big thing we're trying to accomplish. Let's use those numbers as guidance. And now let's install the proof points and the levers to make sure we can actually get there. And that's where people struggle.
Yep. Yep. I love that. That's great. And we've talked a lot about finance, and I think one thing that you mentioned, but we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about, is the sort of the finance arm of Cruise and Co. Okay,
Yep.
so I'm going to give you the sort of evolution of an entrepreneur's finance system. Right, it starts off, and they're just trying to get some revenue coming in, and they might be doing the books themselves. Then they hire a bookkeeper, and that person sort of might be internal, might be external, but they're managing it. They've got their CPA. Then they might move from cash accounting to accrual to just sort of grow up into like really understanding how my finances are working. Then I may need to bring a controller in, and then CFO. But sometimes there's a right time to do all of those pieces, right? Like I don't need a CFO when I'm not making any money, right?
Right.
Like
Exactly.
I don't need strategy, from a
Yep.
finance side. It's like just go sell more stuff. I don't know if you have any thoughts on like that evolution and when people should bring some of those different pieces in, how your firm can show up and be involved, and sort of add value to clients' lives there.
It's interesting when we started to build other offerings to sell to our clients because they needed other capabilities. And that's the reason why we did it. When I
Hmm.
started to add the finance offering into our business, I did it because I had people in my commercial painting business that could do the finance work, and I just had them do it for my clients. I'm like, I
Hmm.
can't consult these people anymore because they're missing so much foundation that I can't do the planning. So, which was, I'd lived that before myself. So the first thing we did was build a finance company. So
Hmm.
it wasn't by accident. We weren't just trying to say, let's make some money here. We built that company because I had been through so much as an entrepreneur and difficulty in finance. And I was having, now that I was working with as a consultant, as a coach, I was struggling to have these companies connect these dots on the
Hmm.
plan.
Yeah.
So my answer to your question is twofold. One, somewhat regardless of size, but amplified as they get bigger. They need to have companies, in my opinion, and we live this. We have three versions of this in our
Hmm.
companies, three different plans. I believe you need to have at a minimum a 1 year set of cash flow and budget tools. No matter how
Hmm.
big you are, you can do an Excel document. It can have
Yep.
20 entries, something around cash flow and budgeting. And then I believe that once you start hitting even over that $2 million or $3 million mark, you got to now add a 3 year as well. And if depending on what you're doing in the 3 years, I'd like you to have broken down by either month or by quarter, and I'd like it to have cash flow and profitability attached to it. Now,
Yep.
why does that matter? It matters because if I'm trying to build a 3 year business plan and I'm trying to make appropriate investments, I have to make sure I have the cash flow in the next 3 years to make those investments. I
Yeah.
then have to be able to look at the P&L and make sure I'm getting the ROI out of those investments. The combination of those two things, one or the other being wrong, is deadly. And I've
Yeah.
done both. I have invested in things that I had cash flow for, which were dumb investments that did not trigger ROI on profitability.
Hmm.
I've also had things that triggered ROI that I didn't have the money to really do.
Yeah.
And then you run out of cash.
Yep.
So I stick to the tools first. We think you need four
Hmm.
tools. Those are two of them.
Yep.
But you gotta know that 1 year and 3 year picture. And you can do it on Excel. You can have a controller do it. Um, Now, in terms of what you actually need staff wise, you could use, if you're smaller, you can use a controller or a super bookkeeper sometimes to make these charts
Hmm.
with you. Sometimes you can make them yourself if you're really small. But as you get bigger, you start needing a controller usually. And then as you start getting bigger, if you start getting into the $8 to $10 million, $10 million plus range, sometimes smaller,
Hmm.
you need some kind of CFOs. What people don't understand is the differences between those. So
Yep.
it's a bookkeeper puts things in the right place on the balance sheet and the P&L.
Yep. Yep.
They're in QuickBooks. A controller says, here's what this looks like. Let me tell you what this looks like. Here's what I'm seeing. A
Hmm.
CFO tells you what to do.
Yep.
Those are what you're buying. That's it in a nutshell. So for us, we agree with you. don't buy what you don't need. If you're small and you know what you need to do, you don't need a CFO.
Yep.
And you don't need an expensive controller. Get a small controller.
Mm-hmm.
Or use us. You get somebody fractional. Get a
Yep.
fractional controller. We can run the books of a company for a bookkeeper. We can throw in a controller and a small amount of CFO services to make sure we know where to hit the ball to, and bookkeeper services for not that big amount of money, because we're helping small and medium-sized companies. We've set these offerings up for that. So I care more that they have the tools done. If they can do it themselves, great. And then to the degree that you scale into a controller and CFO, is going to be the degree to which you need to know those things. And then you can use fractional and cobble it all together until you hire. And then in our case, we have people that use fractional for a long time, and then they'll call us and they say, "Can you hire us somebody to do this full time at a controller level?" And we'll do that too.
I love it, and I think you make a key distinction. I love the definitions you applied to bookkeeper gets the things in the right boxes, right? Controller tells you what's happening, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and CFO tells you what to do. Because oftentimes we see these fractional CFO services, which are bookkeepers. I'm like, that is not fractional CFO work,
So it's the worst, and we're not perfect either. But the difficult one to flag is the controller who thinks they're a CFO.
Yep.
That happens a lot. And I say, you don't just get to call yourself a CFO. It's a thing. So there's a lot of learning there. And I see a lot of small and medium-sized business people who are like, I have a CFO. And I look at him and I say, you have a really good controller, but you do not have a CFO. We're lucky. I get to work with companies that are small and very, very large. So I see people that are phenomenal. And I say, that is really phenomenal. So I get the perspective of degrees.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so I want to take all this and sort of distill it down, and let's talk about, let's say, results a little bit. What are you seeing from businesses that commit to the process?
So our goal, and we track all this on a spreadsheet, is to not only increase your revenue, profit, and valuation from where it is now, it's to increase it more than it would be if you weren't working with us. So there's a distinction. So in the last few years, our clients killed it. So did a lot of companies. So I hear a lot of consultants putting their numbers out there, and I say, I don't know if that beats the market. So the first thing we do is try and benchmark the market. So we say, what is your space doing? And we're going to try and beat that by, if we're conservative, I'm going to say 5 total percentage points or 10 percentage points more, period. We're going to try and beat the market. But we're finding that our clients are growing at a 25% profitability or growth, 25% or more higher than when they didn't work with us. And a lot of that is we have tremendous amount of resources we can bring on board to help. So, our consultants are pretty smart, but they have a lot of people around them that they can bring in and say, well, let's fill that gap. And also, I think because we make people go to the gym and eat their broccoli every quarter, we force a level of intentionality that just creates success.
So we've interacted with members of your team, and I love the depth that we have. Like you've got 2 pieces that I think you're awfully wide, on lots of different topics. And then when we need to go deep into something, the right person shows up and just is like, that's amazing. I shared with you like some numbers from, I was looking at the P&L. I'm talking about Darren. We had a conversation with him. He was in the back of an Uber. I share some numbers with him. He's like doing some analysis and giving me some feedback. I'm like, that's amazing. So I just look at the depth and breadth at Cruise, and it's really, really impressive.
I'm glad you're having that experience. We focus on practice areas. So when we have a practice area that we're trying to build, whether it's COO, or finance or whatever it is, we try and break it into buckets so that we don't so that we say, all right, that practice area has to run exceptional. This practice area has to run exceptional. And then the engagement itself has to link all these exceptional things together. So we try and kind of silo it and then bring the silos to work together well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm
That's
glad you're
great.
having that experience. That's good to
Yeah,
hear.
no, that's fantastic. So, I think one of the things we talked about was focus, and I want to know, what does the ideal Cruise and Co. client look like? If somebody's listening to this, they're like, "Hey, this all sounds really interesting. You know, I want to get engaged." Can you tell us what the ideal client looks like for Cruise and Co.?
So our ideal client, first of all, is growth minded.
Hmm.
So they have this idea that they are something and they want to be something else. It
Hmm.
does need to be, they don't have to knock the cover off the ball, but they want to get someplace where they aren't right now, and they're either struggling to do so, or maybe they're not, but they just want a more unified way of doing it. We also
Hmm.
deal with that.
Yep.
So the ideal client for us is really, once again,
Hmm.
scalable. So $2 million or up, with some kind of repeatable process. We usually take clients on when they're on average, it's probably $8 to $10 million in revenue. We'll take them on board in that
Hmm.
spot, and then we accelerate them. So our client is committed to growth. They are in that dollar range. They are somewhat scalable, or think they're scalable.
Hmm.
If they are pretty well run, they usually want a system of some kind to give them a more unified language, so it's much
Yep.
easier. They also, a lot of clients don't have the resources, so they want the resources. So that
Yep.
people say, I want to grow, I need the resources, I need a system. And the last big thing, they got to have some degree of self-awareness. And if they don't, we are not a lot of fun,
Yep.
honestly, because
Yep.
we are not an easy crowd. Honestly,
Hmm.
we are
Yeah.
deeply caring about our clients, and we get paid to make sure they get what they want out of their lives, and
Yep.
that usually that if they're coming to us, it's because they are at one state and they want to
Hmm.
be in another state. So that
Yep.
requires different activities.
Hmm.
And we
Yep.
tell the clients, look, and our clients are like family. So we
Hmm.
say, look, we're going to get very close to you. We're going to help you. We're
Yep.
going to be committed to you. Just make sure you really want to win, because we're
Yeah.
going to latch on.
I love it. If I just extend out your gym and broccoli or gym and asparagus analogy, right?
Yeah,
If I'm overweight, don't want to move my body, and I'm smoking, and I think all of those activities, keep doing those, is going to help me, lose weight and get healthy. Like, this is not going to be a good fit,
no,
right?
it's not
I
good.
I need
Yeah,
to be aware that I'm overweight, need to be aware that I need to move and stop smoking, and then I can accept the changes that you're proposing to me. So
exactly.
I
And
love that.
then honestly, if you are those things,
Hmm.
the work that we do is, and this is very true. It's not easy,
Hmm.
but it is simple.
Yeah.
We take the most difficult things, and it's simple.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
so we'd love
Yeah.
to work with anybody who's a listener of yours.
I love that. And you're right. Going to the gym, it is simple. It's not
Correct.
easy, right? Like eating, move your body, eat well. Like those are two simple things, right? But it's not always easy to do. So I also want to highlight, I've enjoyed some of your free resources. I'm a part of I get the newsletter. I've been on some webinars. What is the best place for people to go get plugged into some of those things? And we'll make sure we've got show notes that have all of these
So I
links. So if
appreciate
somebody's
that.
listening
So
in their car.
cruiseandco.com, you can go to the Insights tab, and you're going to see all the library of all the past webinars that we've done. There is a lot of great information in there that we get asked about a lot, and we try and go deep on all those topics so that people can use that experience that we have from working with our firms and have that as a library to them. And then we have the Voice of the Entrepreneur newsletter.
Yep.
And that you can just click on the website. You'll see a link to the Voice of the Entrepreneur. That comes out every Thursday, I believe, at 5:30 in the morning, or whatever time it comes out. Everybody makes fun of us for that, but it comes out every single
Sure.
week. And we have a great writing team, and I spend a lot of time with them, coming up with these stories and anecdotes that come from our clients and come from me. And it's our goal is to shoot people straight. This is the
Yeah.
entrepreneur way, and this is what we see. And our goal is to serve as much as we can.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. All right. Eric, is there anything else we should be talking about before we wrap up? Because I think this conversation was great.
Well, I enjoyed it, and you asked questions that I'm not surprised. You're dealing with a level of client that has achieved a lot of basic stuff. And you ask
Mm-hmm.
questions that reflect that, which I really appreciate hearing. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 plus years. And I get a lot of people say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And which was me, for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I get frustrated because I'm
Yep.
saying, sometimes I think, our whole purpose of our firm is to make small and medium-sized businesses say, I know you've been told that. That's not going to do it. But here's what is going to do it. And
Yep.
it's your questions were good around that, and I'm grateful to be able to talk about some of those topics.
Fantastic. You did a great job. I really appreciate everything about your methodology. Like it's exciting, and I'm just looking at it going, man, there's probably a level that we need to have you guys just take a look at how we're doing things and see what things we can button up. I don't
Happy
know.
to.
I love spending money on coaching and development. It's like, if I think about my golf game, right? Like if I want to get better at golf, the best thing to do is pay somebody that can see what I'm doing. And they're going to point out that I'm not doing it the way I think I'm doing it. And they're going to start making improvements, and we're going to fix things and adjust things and make good progress there. So I could see this being a valuable thing. So I love the work you guys are doing. I think it's great. Eric, I know you're busy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
You have a great day.
Take care.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Vital Strategies podcast, where we help entrepreneurs pay less tax, build more wealth, so you can live a great life. Don't forget to check out the show notes for today's episode, where you'll find links to all the resources we discussed. Visit vitalstrategies.com/tools to gain access to our library of free resources designed to help you pay less tax and build more wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. Thanks again for listening and being a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're responsible for being the backbone in our economy. You are vital in creating opportunities for your employees, and you are vital to your family for creating abundance, not just financially, but in all the areas that matter. Finally, you're vital to me because you want to build more wealth and live a great life. We look forward to catching you in the next episode.